In the quiet suburban life of Emily and Mark Collins, everything seemed perfect on the surface. They had a beautiful home, an established place in the community, and had been married for over a decade. But beneath the polished veneer, Emily found herself yearning for more. She was in her mid-30s, attractive, warm-hearted, and known for her genuine kindness around town. Yet, behind closed doors, her marriage felt stagnant. Mark, busy with his demanding corporate job, often seemed more absorbed in his work than in her. He was a good man, no doubt, steady, committed, but somewhere along the way, the spark between them had faded. Emily began experiencing persistent headaches and fatigue, symptoms she initially attributed to stress. However, the idea of visiting the family doctor, Dr. Harris, lingered in her mind. Dr. Harris was a charismatic man in his early 40s, with a rugged handsomeness that had always caught her eye. Recently divorced, he was known for his compassion, and Emily couldn't deny the subtle thrill she felt each time they exchanged glances. Finally, she made an appointment, rationalizing it as a checkup for her health. But when she arrived at his office, she felt a different kind of nervousness take over. She had dressed carefully, her fitted sweater and skirt chosen to look effortlessly elegant. Dr. Harris greeted her with that familiar warm smile, and she felt her pulse quicken. As he asked about her symptoms, their conversation veered from the strictly medical. Emily found herself sharing not only her physical issues, but also her feelings of isolation and yearning for more from her life. Dr. Harris listened intently, his gaze focused, his eyes reflecting empathy. He reached across the desk, his hand resting briefly on hers. It was a comforting gesture, yet it lingered just a moment longer than necessary. Emily held her breath, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. His voice was gentle as he asked if she was truly okay, and in that moment, Emily felt that he understood her in a way Mark hadn't for years. Unable to resist, she stood up, feeling the tension building between them. Dr. Harris mirrored her movement, stepping closer as she looked up at him. Their breaths mingled, and she felt the warmth of his hand as he placed it gently on her shoulder. His thumb traced light circles, and Emily felt herself leaning in, craving the connection that had been missing from her life. He brushed a loose strand of hair from her face, his hand slipping down to graze the neckline of her sweater. Emily's hands found their way to his chest, her fingertips pressing lightly against him. They stood that way, locked in a shared silence filled with unspoken desires. Then, as if pulled by an unseen force, they shared a kiss, a tentative beginning that deepened as they gave into the moment. But just as quickly as it had begun, Emily pulled away, breathless, cheeks flushed. She straightened her sweater, taking a step back as reality settled over her. Dr. Harris cleared his throat, his expression shifting back to a professional calm, though his eyes revealed the lingering spark of what had just passed between them. Emily left the office, her heart pounding, knowing that something had changed irreversibly in her life. From that moment on, their connection grew stronger. With stolen glances and late-night texts, the thrill of secrecy only fueled their attraction, and soon they were meeting in hidden spots, their conversations turning into whispered promises of a future together. Emily was swept up in it all, convinced that somehow they could make this work, that she and Dr. Harris could find a way to be together openly. Dr. Harris assured her he would wait until she was ready to leave Mark, and Emily clung to that hope, ignoring the nagging feeling of guilt in the back of her mind. Mark began to notice subtle changes in Emily. She was more distant, her attention always elsewhere, and she'd become increasingly secretive about her whereabouts. He tried to brush it off as paranoia, but the sense of something amiss grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, after noticing her texting late at night, he decided to confront her. Emily denied everything, evading his questions with vague excuses, but Mark's suspicions only deepened. Determined to find out the truth, Mark started to dig deeper, even installing a small tracking app on Emily's phone without her knowledge. What he discovered shattered him. She had been visiting Dr. Harris far more frequently than he had realized. Unable to contain his anger, he decided to confront Dr. Harris directly. The day before Mark's death was tense. Early in the morning, Mark paid an unexpected visit to Dr. Harris's office, catching him off guard. He demanded answers, his voice low but menacing. "Stay away from my wife," he growled. Dr. Harris, taken aback but determined to hold his ground, tried to deflect, insisting that his relationship with Emily was purely professional. But the tension between the two men was undeniable, and the argument quickly escalated. Mark left with a stern warning, vowing that this wasn't over. Later that day, Emily and Mark had a heated argument of their own. When she returned home from an errand, she found him sitting at the kitchen table, his face dark with anger. Without preamble, He accused her of betraying him, of sneaking around behind his back. Emily, trapped and frightened, tried to deflect his accusations, but her guilt was clear. As the argument grew more intense, she finally admitted her feelings for Dr. Harris, though she stopped short of confessing the full extent of their affair. The admission only fueled Mark's rage, and he left the house, slamming the door behind him. That evening, Emily, shaken and desperate, went to Dr. Harris. She told him everything, that Mark had discovered their affair, that he had threatened both of them. Dr. Harris tried to reassure her, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. They both knew that their secret was no longer safe. The next morning, Mark was found dead in his car, parked just a few blocks from his home. The windows were fogged, and he appeared to be slumped over the steering wheel, an empty bottle of pills on the seat beside him. The initial assumption was suicide, a tragic end for a man seemingly tormented by a broken marriage. But as detectives began piecing together the events of his last day, the simple explanation unraveled, replaced by a much darker, more complicated story. The police quickly discovered that Mark had confrontations with both Dr. Harris and Emily just hours before his death. Witnesses recalled seeing him enter Dr. Harris's office, his face grim, leaving in a barely contained fury. Neighbors heard the raised voices from Emily and Mark's argument at home that same afternoon. The evidence pointed to a night filled with tension, and the whispers began to spread. Had Mark really taken his own life, or had someone helped him along? When detectives interviewed Emily, her distress was evident. Yet her answers were evasive. She admitted they'd had an argument, but insisted she had no idea what had driven Mark to such a drastic decision. But her shaky alibi and inconsistent statements raised eyebrows. Dr. Harris, too, seemed nervous under questioning, though he claimed that his final encounter with Mark had been brief and uneventful. As detectives dug deeper, they found troubling details that cast doubt on the suicide theory. There was evidence that the pills found in Mark's car had been crushed and mixed into his drink, suggesting that he may not have taken them voluntarily. Furthermore, an anonymous witness reported seeing a shadowy figure near Mark's car late that night, adding to the growing suspicion. The police faced a complex puzzle. Emily and Dr. Harris each had a motive, each had opportunity, and each seemed capable of going to extreme lengths to protect their secrets. The town was left to speculate. Had Dr. Harris, desperate to eliminate the threat Mark posed to his career and his forbidden love, tampered with the pills? Or had Emily, cornered and afraid of losing everything, taken matters into her own hands? As the investigation unfolded, rumors of betrayal and murder spread like wildfire. Half the town was convinced that Emily, in a fit of desperation, had orchestrated the perfect crime, while others believed that Dr. Harris, with his medical knowledge and motive, was the real mastermind. The funeral was held in a tense silence, the mourners divided between those who sympathized with Emily and those who viewed her with suspicion. In the end, the question remained unanswered, hanging over the town like a dark cloud. Who had really killed Mark Collins? Was his death the result of a man broken by betrayal, or had someone carefully planned his demise?